Hey, it's Rhea, and I thought it was time for vlog number 2. So, last time I was reading Thrive by Dan Buettner, and he was following 4 people who live in blue zones. And the places that we followed these people were really scattered all over the world. We had Denmark, Singapore, Mexico, and San Luis Obispo, California. And these places were identified as places where people are happiest in the world. And it's interesting because when you start looking at it, you realize there are huge discrepancies between those areas. So we have very poor in Mexico. We have socialism versus capitalism between Denmark and the U.S. We have Singapore, which has very tight government control and limited personal freedoms. So looking at these places, what people, what their lives are like, those lives look very different. And yet these people live longer than other places, and they are happier than other places. So what's going on? Why is that? So the author boils it down to one of the key components is communities. And you can think of that as the city where you live or the space you live in. But that's also the broader sense of who you engage with. And that's one of the important things, is that the people who are happiest have personal interactions. So they have friends who they see on a regular basis. They have groups that they meet with. So it was interesting in Denmark, you think about their location and the cold parts of their year, and it was well over 75% of the people who live there are joiners. They belong to some sort of social club, and that could be, a book club or a girls group or a model train club. It doesn't really matter. It just shows that they are connected in that way. And it's interesting because that makes you socially beholden to someone else, that you're going to be somewhere, that you'll show up, that you'll participate. And their happiness is determinant on you, that if you don't show up, then they don't have anybody to be with. So it helps each other there. I think it could be stretched to a wider, look at community, though. It's like thinking about where we work, so who we work with. Do you like your coworkers? Do you like your boss? But how much time are you there? So in the U.S., we tend to have much longer work weeks and a lot less vacation time available than other cultures. He actually touched on that San Luis Obispo has a high percentage of entrepreneurs, which, somebody who owns their own business is working very hard, because if they're not crazy about their business, who will be? But it also gives them the freedom to decide when they do those things. So if they need to take an hour off in the afternoon to go to a kid's soccer game, they can. Or if they've got girls' night at 6:30, they can leave the office, which could very well be a home office, and go do their thing and then come back and keep working later. So I thought that was interesting, and I've just been thinking about more ways to build in happiness into our lives, into our regular lifestyle. One of the other things he touched on was financials, was that, look at the person he followed in Mexico, and, it's a fairly economically depressed culture or country, but they learn to live within their means. So the food that they have, they are always willing to share because that's part of that community. But, it's food that came from the garden. Like they didn't buy that at a grocery store. That came from one of their neighbors. And just being happy with what you have, which I do feel like in the U.S. we have this very commodity, object-driven culture. which has been an interesting little thought there for me for a little bit now, just because, I like to do the online couponing. So I've kind of gotten away from paper coupons, and I do a lot more online rebates, basically. So using programs like Ibotta or Savings Star, and getting money back after I've paid for something at the grocery store. I also do some data mining, which is based on purchases, because they're looking at your receipts to see what your spending habits look like. So I scan receipts to Receipt Hog and Receipt Pal, and I get points back that turn into money. I've moved a little bit away from that, though. I'm not as diligent about it as I used to be, partly because I'm kind of interested in some other things right now. I've gotten started doing product reviewing, and I started with word of mouth groups like BuzzAgent and Influencer. I've actually just started reaching out directly to companies and distributors, and it's been a really interesting process because I'm surprised how easy that access was. So I started following distributors on Facebook and Instagram, and I would just say, hey, I really like this shirt you posted about. I would love to do product reviews for you. Do you have any upcoming promotions? And they send me stuff, which is great. I love it. I love getting things in the mail. It gives that a little bit of excitement. And I've gotten exposed to things that I probably would not have gotten otherwise, that I wouldn't have thought to buy on my own. But we come back to that commercialism and that consumerism. So my brain's always kind of thinking about that, And one of the big, complaints, from my fella here at home is that how much packaging there is. So there's always a plastic bag, and then there's going to be a cardboard box, and then there's going to be things, and it might be inside another piece of plastic. And so there's a lot of waste that is associated with that, which I see that, I get it. And I wonder about that, how important are these things? Is it worth all that extra garbage that I'm creating? Another kind of point of contention here at home is that he's not very into technology, so he doesn't use social media. He thinks it's a little weird that I do, or that I'd be posting this to total strangers. I sort of think of it as a skill set, so I like doing it, but I like editing my own videos, and I like learning about, photo editing software, and I like learning about the social media platforms. So I feel like that's a separate skill set, and that I'm learning. I'm not here because I really need to connect with somebody that I don't know. It's been kind of fun. There's been a couple people, so out of, ever how many followers I have on any of my social media channels, there's maybe 2 or 3 that I've started to get to know on a more personal level. We haven't met in person, it's all online friendship. But I'm going to say that's less than 1% out there that I've actually feel like I have any sort of connection to. And we both have put in effort to make that happen. So it's not a need for that social connection, really, is why I'm doing it. I feel like I think of it more as a skill set. I enjoy learning about the technology, and I like technology. And when you're away from school, you just aren't exposed to things like that anymore. So where do you learn that? Well, crap, you learn new stuff on the internet, right? So here I am, learning new stuff. I like, though, that some of the things that I've received are things that I probably wouldn't have purchased on my own. And some of them I'm like, and, I use it a little bit, and then I pass it on to somebody who's going to use it more or appreciate it more. There's been a few things, though, that are, I like them. I'm glad that I got them. I think they're fun. I think they're pretty. So, yeah. So do those add to the happiness in my life? I mean, there's some temporary happiness there. Just who doesn't love mail day when there's a package waiting for you or something in the mailbox? I mean, like, get this temporary level of excitement there. But that is temporary, and I don't feel like I'd have to keep doing this to be happy. I don't know, it's made me more aware of all of the things that we have, and that's quite a bit. I feel like I've been to Goodwill more in the last 2 months than I have in the last year. It also makes me very aware of the things that we collect, the things that we get attached to. So, I've said this before, the fella gets attached to mechanical things. He's got a chainsaw collection, they came from grandpas and uncles, and these are very important chainsaws, and you have to have a different chainsaw for boat camping than you use for truck camping versus the chainsaw you use if you're actually cutting firewood, like to get firewood for the season. Oh, very different chainsaws, very different, very different. I don't understand. Versus me, I definitely collect art, I collect paper, I collect fabric, which, you look at my family, my mom and grandmother are quilters. Fabric is important to my family. So, I don't know, just thinking about those things and why we feel connected to things. And what would happen if you lost all of them? Oregon's had a whole lot of forest fires this year, and that was something that I definitely felt more aware of this as a kid, as a teenager. We had a family evacuation plan, and it was written down to, like, you have 10 minutes to get out, this is what you have to grab out of the house. You have 30 minutes to get out, here's what you need to load in a car. You have 2 hours, you're going to hook the boat to the car, and here's what you're going to load into it. So, like, we had this very detailed plan of what was the absolute necessities, and then if you had more time, like, what would it just be really costly to lose? And so I've been thinking about that a little bit more with this fire season that has just been crazy. And you know what? There isn't a whole lot that I'd be worried about losing. I'd be really sad if I lost some of my artwork pieces just because I personally know the artists who made them. And that's maybe the bigger connection there, is that I'm not, like, buying art for investment purposes, but, like, these are things that were handmade by friends, that I adore, and I have that emotional connection to our friendship. And so a painting or, a hand-thrown ceramic mug is a representation of our friendship. So those things are important to me. Books are important to me for education. But what else is here that I couldn't lose, couldn't live without? And I think the rest of it, really could go. Do I need it? No. So, I don't know. Just things to think about. Alright, that's it. Good night.